Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated for the continued health of Chana Bat Simafega, for Ashlema, for Eliyahu Shimon and Mazal Fortuné. Dedicated by Sophie Sasson in honor of her three sons, Raphael, Elliot, and David. May Hashem bless all our IDF soldiers, save our hostages, and protect all of Am Yisrael. Dedicated for a speedy and complete for Ashlema, for Susan Hinder Shoshana Bat Elke Irene. May Hashem grant her a long life. Sponsored by Kimmy Mandel. Also, dedicated loving memory to Nishpatem Fegi Bat Moshe Avram and Tzvi Ben Yaakov, Alehem Hashem, sponsored by their son, Malcolm Cantor. And Breakfast in the Class also sponsored by Stephen Rappaport, the Breakfast King. Dedicated in honor of his son, Yaakov Eliyahu Ben Shlomo Pinchas Rappaport HaKohen, a Harvard student for the article in the Times of Israel on Harvard University's totally inadequate response to the horrific Hamas terror attack on innocent Israelis. And finally, the week of Cobra was sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. My friends, let us begin. There's a very famous Rashi, and I want to read you the words of Rashi. Rashi says as follows. We know that Yitzchak and Rivka weren't able to have children, and we know that they prayed, as we spoke about yesterday, they prayed opposite one another in a very heartfelt, in a very powerful way. The Pasuk says, Vaye'ater lo, and God listened to Yitzchak's prayers. Nitpatzer v'nitpayes v'nitpate lo. Those are not easy words to translate. So let's go one by one. What does it mean that God listened to his prayers? Nitpatzer. What does that mean? What? That's lekatzer. Nitpatzer. What is the root? Is petza diresh. Rashi says it comes from the root of lehaftzir, which means to take something and keep pushing and pushing and pushing it. So in other words, when you're maftzir in someone, it's like you don't let them go. I got this tzedakah, I need you to help us out. You call the guy that afternoon, you call him at night, the next morning, you send him 14 text messages, you send 9 people from the synagogue to ask the guy. After that, you see his wife in the supermarket. That's lehaftzir. To be committed, to be relentless is the right word, is nitpatzer. So God was nitpatzer. The relentless campaign of prayers of Yitzchak Avinu swayed God's judgment in favor of him having a child. V'nitpayes. What does nitpayes mean? Nitpayes means to be appeased. Okay? Like as an example, if you hurt your friend's feelings, if you do something against them, the halakha is you have no teshuvah until sheyifayes et chavero. So nitpayes, not only was God relentlessly, what's it called? I forget. There's a technical term. I'm sure we have somebody here who knows computer sciences. You'll know that one of the ways you can shut down a website is excellent DDoS attack. What is DDoS attack? It sends DDoS. It sends so many requests to the website that the website can't handle it, shuts it down. That's nitpatzer. Nitpayes means that God allowed himself to be appeased by the prayers of Yitzchak. In other words, for whatever was standing in the way, God allowed himself to be appeased till he said, okay. And the final one is nitpate. What does that word mean, nitpate? Literally means allowed himself to be seduced. Where do we have that word? Ones umifate. In a scenario where someone takes advantage of a woman, there's 2 ways. One is where he does it against her will. The other one is where he bends her will by seducing her, convincing her to follow in his ways. These are 3 very powerful words when they're being administered to God. We're saying that God, so to speak, had a DDoS attack. He was overwhelmed by the sheer amount of prayers by Yitzchak and Rivka. Nitpayes, God was appeased by those prayers. And finally, nitpateh, God was seduced, convinced, persuaded by those prayers. Very interesting, these different words. But I want to illustrate something that I think is very important in understanding, in looking at these words. What does it mean that Yitzchak Avinu and Rivka Imenu prayed so much that these three words are relevant to God? That God was, so to speak, overwhelmed by the number, the relentless nature of the prayer. He was appeased by the words of the prayer, and finally he was convinced and persuaded by the prayer. So we're learning Masechet Megillah. Some of you are joining us in learning Gemara 3 times a week. Inshallah, eventually it will become every day. But right now we learn Gemara Sunday morning, Tuesday afternoon, 6 p.m. and Thursday. Anyone that wants to join is welcome to join us. Faddal. We got to get you on board. You need to be learning Gemara. Everybody here. Okay? Now the Gemara says a very interesting line. It says that there was a conversation between Rabbah and Abaye. What happens? Some guy goes up to the Sefer Torah. And he goes up to the Bima to pray a Hazan. He was clearly invited by Sammy. He goes to pray. Anyway, he gets up there and he starts saying, El Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, Hahazak, Hades, Harat, Ha the other thing, Hava Nagila. The guy's giving all sorts of prayers. The this and he's the that. God is this and God is that. Anyway, the Gemara says, what did they tell him? Quiet, you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because if you're starting to say all the prayers, you're not saying enough. Then the Gemara relates a story about Rabbah and Abaye. A guy goes up and he starts praying in front of the Bima, and he says, Hashem, just like you have kindness on the birds, you should also have kindness on the Jewish people. Rabbah says to Abaye, he says, wow, look at how this guy is able to convince his master, how he's able to pray in such a persuasive way. Abaye says to his rabbi, what are you talking about, Rabbi? Remember that we just learned that if the guy says too much, or if the guy says, like you have Rahmanut on the birds, you should have Rahmanut on us, Mishatkinoto, you tell him to be quiet. What he's saying is not good. Gemara answers, Rabbah was trying to challenge Abaye to see if he remembered what he taught him. This guy went up there and he said this. Rabbah was like, oh, Abaye, look how good he prays. Right? He prays so persuasively. Abaye immediately remembered what he'd learned from his rabbi. And he said, you're not supposed to. And the rabbi said, Hazaku Baruch. But now, listen to this. I want to point something out that I think is very powerful about that Gemara that most people do not realize. Rabbah was testing Abaye to see if he remembered that you don't say that line. But what Rabbah said is still true, notwithstanding the fact that the guy used a deficient method of doing so. Rabbah was saying to Abaye, look at how this fellow knows how to convince, how to be persuasive in the prayer in front of his... Happens to be, he's wrong in the way he said it. But this idea illustrates, what we just saw in Rashi illustrates, that a person in their prayer needs to be persuasive. Let me explain. Most people when they pray, how do you pray? You pray to God, you say, Hashem, please give me what I want. And what do you do if you want to pray with kavanah? You say, Hashem, please give me what I want. You say it slower, with more heart. But you know what? I feel like that is sometimes. Of course, that's beautiful. But sometimes I feel like, you know what that's like? Do you ever get in a cab and you tell the guy, you're in another country, you tell him, I need to go to the hotel, it's on the corner, the guy says, he doesn't understand you. He says, "Ata medaber ivrit," so you tell the cab driver, to the hotel, on the corner, speaking slower in a language that the person doesn't speak, doesn't help them understand it. Correct? If that's the case, then kavanah can't only mean praying slower. There has to be something else that you're adding. And what exactly is it that you're adding? And I think we're understanding over here from these words of Rashi what it is that you add to a prayer that makes it so powerful that God listens to that prayer. I want to add one more piece. The Gemara says that this word vaye'ater lo, what does it mean? And God listened to him. Vaye'ater lo means we translate and he listened. But how would you normally say and God listened? Vayishma, like we say in Misraim, and Hashem listened or Hashem heard the prayers of the Jewish people. We don't say vaye'ater. What does vaye'ater mean? Says the Gemara, it comes from the root word atar. What does that mean? No, that also is what it means. But what does it mean in this iteration? It means, that's with a tet, by the way, there's a taf. It means a hoe. Now, maybe you're not familiar because we're not farmers, but there's a long pole with a bunch of sticks at the end of it, okay? And you stick it into the hay, and what do you do with that? You turn the hay over. The job of the hoe of the farmer is to turn over the hay. That's the concept. Says the Gemara, just like the atar turns over the hay, so too vaye'ater lo, the power of a tzaddik, of someone who's praying in such a beautiful way, is the ability to be able to turn over God's judgment from negative to positive. God wanted to do this, and what is your prayer accomplishing? The person's not supposed to get that beracha. They're not supposed to get what they need for whatever reason, whatever punishment. The prayer is capable of vaye'ater lo, and God flipped it for him. What made God flip it? That he was persuaded, that it was relentlessly spoken to, and that he was convinced. Now, my friends, what is the job of the convincer in prayer? Let's look at what the guy did wrong in our Gemara and Megillah. He said, just like you have Rahmanut on the birds, have Rahmanut, please, Hashem, on the Jewish people. And the rabbis say, the Gemara says, well, what's wrong with that? And the Gemara gives two answers. One answer is because you're trying to think that you know what the reason of the mitzvah of sending the bird away is. You're saying it's God's mercy on the animals. But maybe there's really a deeper reason behind it. So therefore it's inappropriate to say that. Other reason is maybe the other birds, maybe the other animals, so to speak, will develop a jealousy that God showed this kindness specifically to the birds, but didn't institute that when it comes to other animals or living things in the creation. But my friends, if it was correct, that would be a wonderful model for, as Rabbah said to Abaye, look at how wonderful, how good this person is at persuading his master. Persuading means that you need to explain to God why you want this. You need to say to God why he should listen to your prayer. Not just Hashem, I need this. Not even just Hashem, I need this because you have kindness. Although that's what we're relying on. To get what we're asking for, we're relying on God's kindness. But let me give you an example of this. Moshe Rabbeinu famously utters one of the most powerful prayers ever, which is also a vaye'ater prayer. What does God say? Heref mimeni v'achale otam karaga. Stand aside. The Jewish people now deserve destruction. What does Moshe achieve with his prayers? He turns the whole Gezerah upside down. How does he do that? What does he say to God? Lama yomeru Misraim bera hotziam la rogotam. Right? To kill them in the mountains. Why should the Egyptians say, God, that you could not take the Jewish people out of Egypt and bring them to Israel? So what did you do? You took them out of Egypt and you brought them to the deserts to kill them there. What Moshe Rabbeinu uses is exactly what we're talking about. He gives a persuasive argument as to why God has to listen to his prayers. Did you hear that? Not just please, I need it, I want it, you're kind, but what kind of chilul Hashem is going to happen if the Jews don't get Israel? What will the people of the nations of the world say if you seem weak, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's going to be a chilul Hashem. Moshe adds a reason why God should listen. That's the nitpayes. That's the nitpatzer part of tefillah. So my friends, when you want to pray, you have to recognize that the power of your prayer is unimaginable. It could achieve things that otherwise never would have been achievable. They never could have been accomplished. But not only do you need to believe in your prayer, the prayer needs to be done in a way where you employ this method, where you're convincing God and you're speaking to God. Now you understand why the Chasidim Rishonim, the Gemara says, they would come to prayer an hour before the prayer would start, because what were they doing? They were preparing arguments. They were saying, I want to ask Hashem that I should live a long life, but you know what? I was blessed already with a long life. Why do I deserve a longer life? Average lifespan at that time, 40 years old. I'm already 60 years old. By what right do I come to God to ask Him to let me live longer? So what do? You say to Hashem, Hashem, I need a long life, and you know why? Because I spend my life trying to teach Torah. You know, Hashem, I'm honest at business. I raise the people in my family, in my office. I teach them how to be honest in business. Hashem, please give me long life so I could spread the knowledge of your ways, the ways of emet, the ways of justice in the world. That's a persuasive argument. You're not just asking for what you want, you're saying why you want it. You're giving God a reason why He can't do it. There's a famous line that goes like this: I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. What does it mean to make an offer that God can't refuse? That's vaye'ater lo. And you turn the justice, the deen, upside down to get what you want. I want to share with you an example of what this looks like. My friends, there's a rabbi in Bnei Brak. He was teaching his community about the power of tefillah. And he shared with them a story that happened with him. He was traveling abroad to do an outreach seminar in Chutz La'aretz. Anyway, as they get to the airport in Israel, they ask around in the terminal before the plane takes off, did anyone not pray Arbit? Slowly but surely, they gather a minyan together. Everyone is praying together. They have quite a large minyan, as is the way, what they're called, with El Al, or other airlines, but especially the Jewish airlines, as Sammy will tell you, right? Sammy always says, take your time, but hurry up. That's what flight times are like with El Al. They're like, it's delayed, and then all of a sudden, when they're ready to go, they're like, last final call. They, immediately they're rushing everyone to get there, right? It's amazing. Baruch Hashem, El Al now is much more organized, on time. They're doing unbelievable things for the Jewish people. I don't know if you saw as well, El Al recently, when they needed to get things to Eretz Israel, they had their technicians undo all of the seats in the planes to turn their passenger planes into cargo planes, to take things to Eretz Israel. Remarkable thing for Am Yisrael in their hour of need. Listen to this, guys. Anyway, I don't know what airline it was, but they're sitting there, they're praying Arbit. All of a sudden, right as they start Amidah, what do you hear? Right? You know how it is, right? I don't know why they hire people who have speech impediments and have a cold, but either way, the point is, you hear all of a sudden on the loudspeaker, flight 175 to wherever they're going is departing, final call, right? Okay. So all of a sudden, everyone started Amidah 1 minute ago. You have people finish Amidah, record time. Finish Amidah faster than it takes the time to turn the pages. Faster than a bolt of lightning. They're 1 minute Amidah, right? 60 seconds. They heard the announcement. They ran, they went and got on the plane. Some people, my friends, they're able to stick it out. They stick it out a little bit more, right? They're 3 minute Amidah. Some guys, even though, they're going to miss the plane, they're committed to praying the way they're going to pray. They're praying 6, 7, 8 minutes. After, maybe they're going to miss the plane, because I'm in the middle of tefillah. How could I run away? This rabbi says, I prayed for 8 minutes. He says, how do I know how long I prayed for? I don't usually know. But I know that when I started praying the Amidah, I looked to see what time the flight was boarding, and I looked to see what time it was now, so I know what time I started the Amidah. So in the 8 minutes, they went from not ready to board, to final call, to we're leaving without you. Anyway, I grabbed my stuff, I ran to the airplane, right? I ran from the... Okay, it's okay. Just take your time, but you can turn it off. Okay? I think people listening to the class were like, wow, Rabbi's investing in background music now. It's a beautiful part of the story, the crescendo. Okay? So listen to this. Anyway, the rabbi sees it's 8 minutes, and he starts running to the airport. He's the last group of people running to the airport, though. Running to the airplane. Except for one woman is still praying there. She prayed longer than everyone, longer than the rabbi. Guy runs to the plane. He gets on the plane. He tells the steward, he says, listen, he says, we just finished praying. When we started praying, you weren't even boarding. Then you rushed everyone to board, but we were in the middle of praying. He said, there's a girl, she's still praying the Amidah, praying so beautifully. You know, is there any way you could still wait? The guy says, listen, I could give you 5 minutes more. He says, because we started boarding late. But he says, but more than that, everyone's already on board. We can't have them wait for someone, even if it's not her fault. The rabbi says, okay, thank you very much. Anyway, what happens? Within the next couple of minutes, right? All of a sudden, they hear from the loudspeaker of the thing, ladies and gentlemen, please, we're going to have everyone get off the plane. Unfortunately, we're having some sort of a problem in the cockpit. They saw some smoke in the cockpit. Everyone off the plane until they check it. The whole plane deplanes. They get off the plane. Anyway, the rabbi gets off. Now he's looking for this girl. And what does he see? Right as everyone's deplaning, Hada, Oseh Shalom Imromav, Huya Aseh Shalom, like she's the welcoming committee. You know? She finishes her prayer. Within a couple of minutes, they put everyone back on the plane, and now she's perfectly on time. She sits down like everybody else, and the plane takes off. The rabbi, he's got a long flight, pops up, finds this girl in a seat. He says, you know something, I was very impressed. You know, to pray as long and with as much intention as you prayed is very special at any given time. But the minute you hear the words, flight number 175 is taking off, departing now, final passage, final boarding call. You know, you're getting like tzitzt, they would say in Jewish. You get like nervous, you get jumpy, you get anxious. To hold your kavanah, even through that, is very difficult. I was very impressed. She says, listen, I'll tell you the truth. She says, I'm about 30 years old. My friends got married when I was very young. It took me a very long time now I can't find anyone to get married to. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to accept on myself for 30 days to pray every word, focused on every word. I don't move on until I said that word with intention, with clarity, without letting my mind wander. So it takes me quite some time to pray. Anyway, I prayed this afternoon. I got to pray. All of a sudden I heard like everybody else. And I thought, you know what? This is Hashem testing me. I accepted this on myself, Bili Neder. And Baruch Hashem gave me the emunah to say to myself, even if the flight goes, I promised I'm going to pray the right way. And I prayed the right way. And look, Hashem eventually let me get back on the plane. And everything sorted itself out. Anyway, the rabbi, he sees, a rabbi could smell not only a toaster fire, a rabbi could also smell when there's a story in the works, okay? You can tell when the rabbi sees that there's something going on here. Anyway, he goes up to the steward. He says, tell me, what happened in the cockpit when I asked you for those extra few minutes? The steward says, I'll tell you the truth. They saw some smoke in the cockpit. They checked it out. They couldn't find anything wrong with the plane. We have no idea why. There's nothing wrong. We ran every test. Everything's fine. But just for safety, we had to get everybody off to check it off. So we took everybody off. We checked it out, came back in. There wasn't even a problem. He says, and tell me, why did you ask for 5 more minutes? He says, I'll tell you, there's a girl, she heard the thing, she was praying, such devotion, unbelievable. This guy, the steward, he's a Jewish steward. He said, that's amazing. He says, I can't believe someone has the faith, someone has the strength of character to be able to do that. And anyway, he starts talking to the rabbi. The rabbi says, well, if you're so interested in Judaism and in faith, he says, when we land, I'm going to give this outreach seminar. Why don't you come and join us for one of the classes or something? Guy said, I'd love that. Anyway, the steward now comes to the class of the rabbi in this random country. Okay, he comes back, so excited, back to Israel after this outreach seminar. The guy decides he wants to learn more about Torah, signs up to do 1 year in yeshiva. The guy spends time learning about the prayers, learning about Shabbat, till he becomes a full-fledged religious person who does everything from A to Z in the Torah the proper way. And then one day the guy gets a phone call from a shadchan suggesting a magnificent girl. And he goes out with this girl, and turns out who's the girl he's set up with, that he winds up marrying, building a family with and having children with? This girl from the airport who prayed at that flight to be able to get married. So that something happens in the cockpit that we don't even know what it is. So that everyone gets off the plane, so that the rabbi could ask the question, so that the guy could be impressed, so that he could go to a seminar, so that he could be worthy of the woman who was praying in the first place, not knowing what she was praying for. And I thought to myself, they could not figure out what fire made that smoke. But it turns out it was the fire in his soul. It turns out that it was this guy getting lit up on fire, Be'ezat Hashem, his neshama connecting to Borei Olam for the first time in his entire life. My friends, Vaya'ater lo. And who's the guy? I'm joking. So everyone's like, right? But my friends, what does this teach us? It teaches us this concept of nitpatzer, of nitpayes, of nitpater. It teaches us that when a person prays the proper way, when a person is praying and not thinking to themselves any of these other things, they're focused, they have understanding, they're praying in a persuasive way, the most unlikely things get turned over in an instant, and something beautiful emerges from that. Hashem should bless us to transform our prayer, because praying, my friends, is everything, but it is not simple. And I want to ask you for 1 second to think about prayer the way you think about walking into your boss to ask for a promotion and ask for a raise. You sat down before that meeting and you thought to yourself, why am I good? What sets my work apart? What can I say that will make my boss not be able to not answer my request in a positive way? If you're not thinking that way when you come to the big boss of all bosses, then you're selling your own prayer short. Make God an offer He can't refuse. Be relentless in your tefillah. Make sure that the argument you're putting forward is a persuasive one. And then Be'ezrat Hashem, Vaya'ater lo, God will turn over that justice and give you what you want, even if it is the very opposite of what you could have possibly imagined the outcome being. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.